And welcome in to Pressbox Live. I'm Stan the Fan Charles from Pressbox and PressBoxOnline.com. With me is Gary Stein. How are you this evening, Gary?
Doing good, Stanley. How about yourself?
I'm doing great, and I can't wait to get to our guests, but I've got to read something first. Pressbox Live is brought to you by C3 American Exteriors. Go to their website at c3america.com to get a brand new roof for just the cost of your insurance deductible. With us tonight on the Zoom video that we do every Wednesday night is one of my favorite people to sit nearby in the press box, or one of my favorite people to read, and that's the AP's very fine writer for these many years, David Ginsburg. And David, first of all, happy, healthy New Year to you and your wife.
Much thanks, Stan.
And let's start with the 8,000-pound elephant in the room. David Ginsburg is retiring. Why in the hell are you retiring? You still write like you're 35 years old.
Well, I appreciate that. Here's my thing. I am 67. I've been doing it for 37 years. And I want to do it when I want to do it and not when I have to do it. So, Stan, I'm retiring as a full-time AP writer, but my intent is to, once COVID's done and we can actually enjoy ourselves, you and I in the press box, Gary, you and I in the press box at Ravens without having to be separated. I hope to do it on a part-time basis. Stan, I love what I do, always have, and would like to continue to do so a little less so.
All right. Let me just ask you, you mentioned COVID. Did that take away a lot of it? Has that taken away a lot of enjoyment? Because I know one of the things you love is BSing with the guys and the gals in the press box. Did it sort of take something away from you?
Killed it. Yes, It killed it, man. I mean, first of all, missed you, Stan. You and I talking all the time.
Predicting Chris Davis's strikeouts.
Yeah, exactly. Look, you still have to get there 3 hours before the game. Only this time you have to wear a mask. There were two guys in my row, two guys who I like, Rich Dubroff and Rod Kabatko, but you couldn't walk through the press box. It was really stay in your seat, wore a mask for 6 straight hours, brought my own food. That got old real quick. One of my favorite things about that is 6 o'clock, we're going up to the cafeteria, we're going to chew the fat for an hour and then come down and cover a ball game. None of that was there. I covered all 33 of those games, but the enjoyment factor was about 35%. Still got to see baseball.
Yep.
Everything else was different, and I didn't care for it too much.
But Dave, let me ask you though, if COVID hadn't happened and you had an enjoyable season and probably an enjoyable Ravens season, would you still have called it quits?
Well, a good question, Gary, but yes, it was always my intention to take this one last Ravens season. My last day is scheduled to be February 14th, so it's given it through the Super Bowl and one more week to wrap it up. But, I have to plan my vacations around the Ravens. I couldn't do anything in January, even in September. Who knows whether we get into the playoffs. So January was killed. And then I look at the Orioles schedule and I can't go to the beach when the Yankees are in town or they've got a 10-game homestand. Now I can, and that was my plan. I mean, I still enjoy doing it, but I don't want to do it. I don't want to cover 75 games anymore. Maybe, 10, 11, 12. That'll be just fine for me.
Yeah. So, look, I wish we had more time. Obviously, we can talk about all 37 years. But if you just want to, one of the things that I always think about is how a sports writer or a radio person, TV, whatever, over the course of their career, how they view sports, how much sports has changed, how much their job has changed. I know these are questions that have long-winded answers, but when you think about it and you think back over 37 years, what comes to mind about the changing nature of the way sports is and the way we cover sports today?
Well, excellent question, Gary. You know what? I think sports has pretty much been the same. Sports hasn't changed. We got the same thing going on, except with the exception of COVID. But all the teams have, it's pretty much, it's blown up. If you might recall, when the Ravens first got here, no one cared. There
Yeah.
were 4 people out there covering the team. I mean, no one cared. It was crazy how unremarkable it was that Baltimore had a football team again. Maybe they were a little embarrassed, whatever, but we had no coverage out there. I was one of few with Preston and maybe a couple other people. Now it's blowing up. Everyone covers the NFL. But, I've been around so long. I just want to talk about when I first got here, I typed my stories on a typewriter, tear it up, and then tear it out of the thing and then read it to the person on the other side of the desk. That's how I covered a game.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, it was on paper and I'm dictating the story. Now we've got laptops that, click of a button and the thing's sent. I used to have to send a story 9 outs before the end of the ball game so they could get all the stuff and then put it into the system. I had a guy next to me keeping the box score that would go on the national wire. Don't do that anymore. But, I'd dictate the story with 9 outs to go. Someone would have 3-run homer in the bottom of the 9th, and I'd be having to do the whole thing over again, really, over the phone. So that I don't miss at all. I love having a laptop and doing a game there. It's wonderful. Not to mention the internet. We now have a source instead of who knows how. I can't even remember. You had to go to the library and read to find stuff, or whatever they had in the notes, and that was it. So covering a game is a lot easier now than when I brought my own little electric typewriter to the ballpark. But, and we didn't have Twitter and all that stuff. So there's a lot more involved in that regard. But, sports has remained the same with the exception of the explosion of the NFL.
Let me ask you,
I didn't say too much there. I'm done.
You've covered sports, like we said, for 37 years. Who are some of the people around the games that you've really liked? And I'm not talking about Craig Heist or me or announcers. I'm talking about people that you've covered. Can you name 5 people out of those years that you say, this is like really somebody I enjoyed covering?
Okay, that's fairly easy. I mean, Cal, he was great. I mean, Cal, what an honor to be on a first name basis with Cal Ripken. I mean, I covered him for so long. I mean, I was on the first name basis with his kids.
I got to be honest with you, David. He came up to me one time and he said, that guy's name over there. Just kidding. Just kidding.
I might believe it. I think John Maroon had to tell him 6 times before he got it right. You might surprise you. First of all, Joe Flacco, class act, really enjoyed him. Believe it or not, I thought Ray Lewis was great. Some people call him a phony. I never did. I loved Ray Lewis, his enthusiasm for the game, best linebacker that ever played the sport. And on Wednesdays, you knew you could go by his locker and get a good story. Guy liked to talk and he said good stuff. Someone that might surprise you is Luke Scott. If you remember him with the Orioles.
Yeah.
Covered him did a little story on him at spring training, and he just embraced me. And then he introduced me to his mom and his brother. And we ended up, all of us, first name basis, guys, it's so rare, but I'd go into the Orioles clubhouse and Luke would go, Dave, come on over. Let's chat a little bit. And we didn't talk about baseball. Sometimes it did, how he got his bat ready for a game. But other times we talked about religion. I'm Jewish. He wasn't. I asked about his. He asked about mine, all with no animosity. Really, really enjoyed the guy. And just about, by the way, everyone who plays hockey is a great guy. I really loved me some Ole Kolzig. Ole, the goalie, was a really good guy. And back then, you talk about how sports has changed. They used to practice at in Odenton, Maryland, and there were 6 people there in the stands watching and 2 recovering it. And you could really get close to some of the guys there. Peter Bondra, another class act. So really, there's not a guy in hockey that you're going to say is a jerk. They were all good. So
I got to ask you, you're an AP writer. I always hear that there is an AP style. Can you explain that in a few sentences, what the AP style is?
Well, you know what? I can really give it to you in the who, what, where, when, and why.
Okay.
If you stand, you say you read some of my stories. I'm sure you do too, Gary. The first take, let's get it out there. You're writing for the country, and they don't want to see a lot of flowery stuff. A lot of the times, they're just going to use your top 3 or 4 paragraphs. So you better make those good, and you better make them the ones that sum up the game. And then you get down to the rest of the stuff. But really, I would call AP style succinct, accurate most of all, and timely. Those 3 words really sum up what you have to do on any given night. And after I send the first story, I stick around, I get quotes, and then I make the second story a little bit more reader friendly, a bit of incorporate some of my sense of humor and style into it. You can have a little more fun with that second story than the first.
So let me just jump in, Gary. I'll ask him one more and then I'll turn it over to you. So when you started, was there somebody who mentored you in this style and was really like sort of a mentor to you that taught you
That's
the style?
Another great question. I had 2 of them, both of them with the Associated Press. So Ira Rosenfeld of Washington took me under his wing. When I first started, I started in the DC bureau, and Ira took me up to Redskins Park, and I was off the clock. He was not, but I wanted to be a sports writer. So I went with him, and he told me the right things to what the best part was to write about. And he let me do some writing. And, after we went there, he would say, okay, what's the story? What's the best quote? After we listened to Joe Gibbs talk for an hour, what's the story here? And I would say it, and he'd either go, yep, you're on target, or, no, maybe this is really the story. And then Gordon Beard, maybe anyone who has been around Baltimore for a long time. He was a great man. He got me going. He got me the job in Baltimore, really. I was too removed from him when I got the job in Baltimore in 1990. And he allowed me to cover Caps, Bullets, Orioles games. Those 2 guys really meant the most to my career. Probably wouldn't be talking to you right now if it wasn't for either of them, and certainly both of them.
Hey, Dave, I want to go back to the question that Stan asked you a minute ago. I found your answer interesting on many fronts about like some of the nicest guys basically that you've covered over time. I wonder how you feel about this. You talked about, personal things that you and Luke Scott talked about, a relationship that you had with Cal on a first name basis. Joe Flacco was a pleasure, et cetera, et cetera. And your job is more than just writing a story, X amount of words for the AP. It's going to the games, attending practice, interviewing players, getting to know them, et cetera. I wonder, Stan and I made our mark in radio for many years, which really was more of almost a combative relationship between radio talk show host and fan and player. You always wanted to, I mean, not always, but, be critical to say something special or outstanding or outlandish to make a mark.
Constructively, I always thought it was being constructively critical.
Whatever you say, Stan. I remember sometimes, okay, whatever. But regardless, Dave, I wonder, most fans miss that. In other words, they don't have the type of relationship that you could ever foster with a Cal or a Joe Flacco. All they want to do is know why we didn't win the game, basically. And I wonder how you feel about that. After 37 years, the difference between your relationship with players in sports and probably most fans' relationship to players in sports.
Well, you know what, Gary, for the most part, we see how hard they try, how hard they play, and we get to know some of these people. And I think, I'll tell you, for instance, I mean, when I see we'll never win with Lamar Jackson at quarterback and, the guy can't throw the ball, it's sort of, I mean, that's the fan and that's the bad fan. To me, and you guys, Lamar, and a guy that's trying really hard, and the Flacco got the same criticism. I think part of it is by knowing the guy, You understand that how hard he tries, and I really hate to see when they're criticized unjustly. I mean, look, you could have torn Lamar a new one after his first playoff game, and rightfully so. But don't make it that harsh, because I think I know these guys get a lot of money, but it's so important to them, and I think we all, us three here, have a better idea of how important it is to them to win, and not necessarily the money, but to win. And it's pretty tough to for me to break bad on them, as some of the fans do. I just think by knowing these guys, I mean, I would always root for Cal to get a hit, because Cal's a good guy, and I know that he's a good guy, and maybe other people don't, unless maybe he came over, gave him a nice autograph, and maybe you're a Cal fan for life. But I hope I make sense to what your question was.
Yeah, yeah. You work both in DC and Baltimore. There's kind of like a little bit of an inferiority complex, I think, from time to time, the Baltimore sports fan versus the DC sports fan. But I don't know. I mean, I think that seems to be evening out a little bit of late. But regardless of that, and you worked in DC for what, 6 or 7 years, I believe, and I know it was a long time ago. But do you see a difference in the two sports markets, the way the fans react to the teams and the teams react to the fans?
Well, I do. And by the way, let me just say that you might know I grew up in Silver Spring, Maryland.
I do.
The biggest Redskins fan there was. So always rooted for them, and frankly hated the Colts. Okay. But once I moved over to Baltimore, I completely gave up on my allegiance to DC and became a Baltimore fan. I know maybe it's not the right thing to do, but to your point, if you guys have been to games in DC and you've been to games in Baltimore, there's really a difference. I think that I think that they make it more of a show in DC. They're not the Nats fans, even though they sold out the series. They need a show to make that thing happen. It's more to me like a minor league game with the play ball, the fan, and every between innings contests. In Baltimore, man, you're gritty. You just want to see the O's play some ball and maybe drink a few Natty Bows while it's happening. You don't really care to see a clown show between innings. I just think it's crazy, but I do believe that the Baltimore fan is more sophisticated and more loyal. I think they've abandoned ship on the Redskins down there, or excuse me, the Washington football
team.
But they're just they lost interest. But I would be stunned if the Ravens ever had had to clamor for fans to fill that stadium. They may be 1,000 short of a sellout one day, or down the road, but I just think the fans are more adamant about their team here in Baltimore.
Let me jump in and follow up on that question. Do you expect, and now I'm just asking your opinion of something to get into the sports a little bit, do you expect fans to immediately come back at the levels they were when the pandemic hit? Or do you think this pandemic, in a larger view, could be sports's biggest nightmare? That, all of a sudden people have gotten used to watching the games at home, and not fighting for traffic, not paying high prices for tickets. Your thoughts?
Here's my thought. If it's safe to go, they will go. Man, I think people miss going to games. I miss going to games. I miss the crowded games. I miss, it's just not the same with no one there. And I think people, you see it at Buffalo, they had 16,000 fans there that were clamoring for their team. And I believe once the doors are open, they're going to be running through them doors. As long as they're not wearing masks or having to stay, they'll trickle in if the restrictions are still in place. But man, I mean, I gotta think that once the gates are open, we're done with the pandemic, it's baseball time, baby, or whatever, they'll be running through the doors to have, and they'll have tailgates, all that stuff. People miss that stuff. That's what going to games is about. It's not, I've always thought the people who preferred TV, not true fans. I love being at the event, whether it be
We'll remind you that Pressbox Live is brought to you by C3 American Exteriors. Go to their website at c3america.com to get a brand new roof for just the cost of your insurance deductible. We're talking to the retiring David Ginsburg from AP. David, I wanted to ask you a different variation of the question I asked before. Who did you enjoy covering? Who, and I know a lot of times you're typing away, and you're talking, but you're typing. Who has made you over the years stop typing and actually watch? Is Lamar Jackson one of those people? Is he one of the most fun people you've covered at your eyeballs kind of bulging out and going, man, that is great?
By all means. I mean, he's great. And, I enjoyed the Ravens defensive hold. How could you not enjoy seeing Ray Lewis make a tackle, Terrell Suggs make a sack? I mean, a lot of those things, believe me, it's unfortunate in the fourth quarter. I don't care what's happening. I'm typing because I just can't afford to watch the game and expect to get a story out when it's over. So, I mean, that's what's happening. But, there will be guys when, I'll tell you what, when Cal Ripken was at the plate, I'd always stop and take a look at that. I mean, that was, you had to see that. And back in the day, Chris Davis, the guy was hitting monster home runs. And it was a treat. You didn't, he was hitting them with one hand and you and I, Stan, reveled at it.
Yep.
And now, now I'm walking up to get a hot dog when Chris is up. So, there are a lot of good athletes that I've enjoyed and really had to see play. But I got to be honest with you, come the fourth quarter or the ninth inning, I'm pretty much got to get that story out, and that's my focus. I am getting paid to do a job. As much as I'm a fan, I just have to write at that point in the game. As Gary knows, he sits behind me at the Ravens.
Yeah.
He sees the fourth quarter, pretty busy.
Dave, did you ever want to do anything else in your career? Was this always your one and only?
Yeah, it was. It really was. I love to write and I love sports. As you guys can probably tell, I'm not the most comfortable in front of a screen, and I'm not great radio. I have a face for radio, but I'm not great on radio. I love to write. I love to, it's always what I wanted to do, Gary. So lucky to have gotten this job. I mean, from way back when I wanted to be a sports writer when I knew I couldn't play. And, the idea that I could go to a game and write about it, game starts, by the end, I got 550 words typed in, and I've covered that, I've told the story of that game. And it's just, it's really, really gratifying. Really been blessed. I mean, I can't believe how lucky I've been to have this job. Never once did I go to work or go to the ballpark going to, sigh. Never. Always loved it. What a treat. And I didn't just see baseball, as you know, I saw football and basketball and hockey and went to Navy and a lot of different things I enjoyed. Turns out that working for AP was perfect because of the variety that I had. So, I really, it's what I always wanted to do. I got to do my dream. And, I hope to maybe get a few shots at it after I'm done.
So Dave, let me ask you, because in that answer you mentioned, going to the game a few times, and the big smile was on your face when you talked about the game. I wonder how you feel. It used to be, Dave, and I remember it was just a few years ago, where sports and politics would never mix, right? If you brought up a political topic on a sports talk show on radio, people would smack you down on Twitter and say, I'm listening to sports. I don't want to talk about politics and this, and I don't care what you what do you know about politics? What are you saying about, like, why are you? And now it appears that the game isn't just a game anymore. Everything is political now, and sports isn't exempt from that. Now, your job, I know, isn't to write politics into your sports. I get that. But do you agree that there is politics in sports now, and do you like it?
Well, I think it's more of a moral issues. I don't know that I ever had the Trump versus anyone argument in the clubhouse. But there's really, I mean, if you're talking about politics, about taking a knee and the anthem, I think a lot of people are stating their opinions on social injustice far, far more than before. I mean, when Kaepernick took the knee, it was unbelievable. All the Ravens are doing it and no one cares anymore. I do believe, your definition of political, I don't think we're talking about congressmen and presidents as much as we are talking about on a daily basis, social injustice. I mean, they've got it on their helmets. It's in the end zone. They're definitely aware of what's going on. And people have opinions about what happened at the Capitol, but more or less, in this age, I think if you have a political opinion, you don't want to throw it out there because you're going to tick off half the people who don't share that opinion.
David Ginsburg, before we let you go, we always love a good story about siblings on the playing field. Cal Ripken, Billy Ripken, Ken Griffey Sr., Ken Griffey Jr. The past couple of years, you've gotten a chance to work side by side with your brother on more than a few occasions. How much have you enjoyed that? Because your brother Stephen did the same thing you did, but up in New York for a long, long time with Reuters. But now you've gotten a chance to work with him. Was that a nice addition to your career?
Oh, so nice. And when we were going into this last season, the last season that I knew was going to be my last one, I just said, the heck with it. Steve, you can work whatever game you want. You and I are working this thing together, because as you know, Stan, I have a cachet of stringers, but
Yep.
I'm just going to say the heck with it. I get such a thrill out of working with Steve that we were going to do it all the time. I mean, it took away so much from this season that I could only work the game myself.
Yeah.
And that was brutal. But let me also throw in that my son, who's now 30 years old, I worked a lot of games with him. Gary, you might have seen him at the Ravens.
I did.
Yeah.
There were a couple games where it was me, Steve, and Jaron, my kid, and man, I was in heaven. I was in heaven. Just had such a great time. Yeah, Gary, you met my kid at the synagogue, but we just, yes, Stan, I'm glad you asked that question. I cannot tell you how much fun it was to cover a game with my brother and on occasion cover it with my son. It just made it all the better because, of course, obviously love them and they love sports and they were actually pretty good as helpers.
Do you get to pick your successor or does AP pick your successor?
AP will pick my successor. It will likely come from within the company. Just a quick story of how I got the job in Baltimore. Back when I was in Washington, I covered the Redskins, Georgetown, and the rest of the time I was on the desk covering DC news, making cop calls, making fire checks. When the Baltimore job opened, I jumped. They took me, and then I became full-time sports. I suspect that that's how this thing is going to play out. Someone in a smaller locale will get the chance to be a full-time sports writer. They'll pick him, and he'll be hopefully as happy as I was in Baltimore.
All right. Last thing I got for you is when will you be able to write cover stories for Press Box? Do you want to wait about 3-4 months? Or are you ready to go?
If provided I don't have to wear a mask in the press box as soon as that day happens. And as you guys know, I've written many a story for Press Box. Luke is a heck of an editor. I enjoy writing for you guys. And I'm going to say February 15th, the day I retire. Let's rock, man.
All right. David Ginsburg, we really appreciate. Gary, you got anything else for David?
I don't have another question, but I will say this just as a parting shot. Dave, listen, sports is all about wins and losses, as you know. I think from a media perspective here in Baltimore, you retiring is a loss. No disrespect to the person who's going to replace you. I'm sure he or she will be great. But Dave Ginsburg, 37 years, man, that's a little bit of a loss right here.
Thanks so much, guys. Thank you. Means a ton to me. And I'll miss you both, but you haven't seen the last of me. Hope to see you down the road in some press box.
That's the way we feel about you, David
Sounds good, Dave.
Ginsburg. What is Craig Heiss going to do without you up there posing for the Oriole giveaway photos?
I guarantee you know what, Stan? You're going to have to be the new guy. Get your
All right.
bottle and hat.
I will. All right, David Ginsburg, many thanks for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, man. Thank you so much.
All right. For Gary Stein, I'm Stan the Fan, and we remind you that Pressbox Live is brought to you by C3 American Exteriors. Go to their website at c3america.com to get a brand new roof for just the cost of your insurance deductible. We'll see you next Wednesday night down the road.